The black cleaning lady rushed the millionaire's daughter to the hospital, blood dripping onto the Italian marble as the 5-year-old girl convulsed in Regina's arms. The $16 million mansion had never witnessed such urgency. "Call an ambulance. Now!" Regina shouted, her voice echoing through the empty corridors of the Harrison estate. But there was no time to wait. Little Isabella was turning purple, and every second counted. Regina Santos, 42, had been working as a cleaning lady in that house for only 3 months. A single mother of 2, she never imagined that his first aid knowledge, learned when his own son nearly died of asthma, would save the life of his richest man in town's daughter. Without hesitation, Regina picked up Isabella and ran to her old rusty pickup truck parked at the back of the property. The contrast was brutal, a black woman from the suburbs carrying the blonde heiress to an estimated $200 million fortune. At the hospital, doctors rushed to receive the child while Regina, her uniform stained with blood, shouted vital information. She had a seizure. It lasted 3 minutes. She was conscious before she passed out. Outside the emergency room, Regina trembled as she realized the gravity of what had happened. She had left her post, used his personal car, and made decisions about his boss's daughter without authorization. In any normal company, this would be grounds for immediate dismissal. What Regina didn't know was that David Harrison, CEO of the country's largest construction company, was stuck in a board meeting when he received the desperate call from a hospital. For the first time in 10 years, he canceled everything and rushed to find her daughter. When David arrived at the hospital and saw Regina sitting in the hallway, a simple woman who had risked everything to save Isabella, something inside him broke in a way that would change his outlook forever. But there was something no one knew about Regina, a secret she had kept for years that made her gesture even more meaningful. And when David discovered the truth about her brave past, her gratitude would turn into something much greater. If you're following this touching story of courage and transformation, be sure to subscribe to the channel to find out how a single moment of bravery can completely rewrite the fate of 2 very different families. 3 hours later, when Isabella finally woke up stable in the pediatric ICU, Regina was still in the hospital hallway. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a controlled rage that had been building since she arrived. David Harrison came running down the hall, his $3,000 suit wrinkled and her face pale with despair. When he saw Regina sitting in the cheap plastic chairs of the waiting room, something in her eyes changed, a mixture of gratitude and confusion that she recognized immediately. "You saved my daughter," he said, his voice breaking. "How can I thank you?" Regina stood up slowly, wiping away the tears she had been holding back for hours. "I just want to know if she's going to be okay, Mr. Harrison." What David didn't know was that Regina had lost her own son, Kevin, at the age of 7, not to a seizure, but to a healthcare system that had rejected him 3 times before finally admitting him. Too late. The irony of saving a millionaire's daughter when he couldn't save his own son ate away at her like acid. In the days that followed, the news spread through the mansion like poisonous gossip. Victoria Harrison, David's wife and Isabella's mother, returned from her trip to Europe 2 days later. Blonde, elegant, and with an aristocratic coldness that cut through the air, she immediately questioned the version of events. "You left our daughter in the hands of a maid?" Victoria asked during dinner, her voice dripping with contempt. "David, have you completely lost your mind?" Regina, who was discreetly cleaning the adjacent room, heard every poisonous word. Victoria continued, "These people always have ulterior motives. She's probably already planning how to take advantage of the situation. Have you seen how she looks at our things?" David tried to defend her, but Regina noticed the hesitation in his voice. The man who had cried with gratitude in the hospital now faltered under the social pressure of her own wife. Regina's revenge would not come from emotional outbursts or direct confrontations. She had learned, in the pain of losing Kevin, that the system worked differently for people like her. But she had also learned something that Victoria and his high society friends did not know. Regina Santos was not just a cleaning lady. With a nursing degree from the State University and a specialization in pediatrics, Regina had been forced to take cleaning jobs after being fired from 3 consecutive hospitals. Not for incompetence, for attitude problems, as the report said. What really happened was that she questioned discriminatory protocols and defended poor patients with a firmness that bothered white supervisors. On the 4th day after the incident, Victoria summoned Regina for a talk in the main room. Sitting in her Italian leather armchair, surrounded by her high society friends, she smiled with the refined cruelty of someone born privileged. "Regina dear," Victoria began, using the condescending tone that rich people reserve for employees. "We are very grateful for what you did for Isabella. Really, we are. But some people are saying that you are taking advantage of the situation. Asking for things, making demands." Regina stood her ground, her eyes fixed on Victoria. "I haven't asked for anything, Mrs. Harrison." "Of course not, dear. But you understand our concern, don't you? Sometimes people in her position can get the wrong idea about what they deserve." What Victoria didn't notice was the dangerous gleam that flashed in Regina's eyes at that moment. It wasn't submission, it was the look of someone who was calculating every word, every gesture, every breath of arrogance to use against them later. Because Regina Santos had kept something safe during all those years of humiliation: evidence. Documents, recordings, medical records that showed exactly how the American healthcare system treated people like Kevin, and how families like the Harrisons received VIP treatment even for minor emergencies. While Victoria and her friends laughed at jokes about people who don't know his place, Regina smiled inwardly. They had no idea that they had just awakened someone who would turn his arrogance into fuel for a justice that would take years to be served, but would be devastatingly complete. That night, while cleaning David's office, Regina discreetly photographed documents from Harrison Construction, million-dollar contracts with public hospitals that promised modern equipment but delivered second-rate materials, while private hospitals received the best in medical technology. What none of the Harrisons knew was that every gesture of contempt was being carefully documented by someone who had turned the pain of loss into an unstoppable force of calculated justice. 2 weeks after the public humiliation in the Harrisons' living room, Regina Santos had become something Victoria could never have imagined: a silent and methodically relentless investigator. Every morning, when she arrived at the mansion at 6 o'clock, Regina was no longer just a cleaning lady. She was a documentarian of injustice, collecting evidence with the surgical precision of someone who had studied medicine before being forced to clean the bathrooms of rich people. Her first ally appeared unexpectedly. Dr. Marcus Williams, the black pediatrician who had treated Isabella at the hospital, sought out Regina after hearing rumors about how she was being treated by the Harrisons. They met at a discreet cafe on the outskirts of town. "I know who you are, Regina," Marcus said, pushing a folder across the table. "I looked up his name after that day at the hospital. Registered nurse, specializing in pediatrics, fired from General Hospital, Municipal Medical Center, and the Children's Health Institute. Always for the same official reason: behavioral problems." Regina opened the folder, and his heart raced. Inside were copies of medical reports, hospitalization records, and a frighteningly long list of poor black children who had died or suffered permanent sequelae from medical negligence in the last 5 years. "Behavioral problems," Marcus repeated bitterly, "because you questioned why children like Kevin were left waiting while the children of donors like Isabella received VIP care. Do you have any idea how many lives could have been saved if there were more people like his in hospitals?" What Marcus revealed next made Regina's blood run cold. David Harrison wasn't just the CEO of a construction company. He was a member of the board of directors of 4 hospitals in the region, including the one where Kevin had died. More than that, Harrison Construction had million-dollar contracts to modernize hospital equipment that often arrived defective or with lower specifications than promised. "He profits twice," Marcus explained, her voice low but laden with indignation. "First by selling low-quality hospital equipment at premium prices. Then, as a board member, he votes to approve those same contracts. It's a medical corruption scheme that kills poor children and enriches families like the Harrisons." Regina closed her eyes, seeing Kevin's face for the 1,000th time. Now she knew, the same family whose daughter she had saved was responsible for the death of his own son. Over the next few days, while continuing his cleaning duties, Regina discreetly installed a recording app on his cell phone. Victoria and her high society friends continued to treat her like invisible furniture, openly discussing their financial schemes and racist comments in her presence. "These people really have no sense of place," Victoria said on the phone with a friend, while Regina cleaned the adjacent bathroom. "David is being too soft with her. In my day, that kind of person wouldn't have even come close to our daughter." The recording was being made. Every poisonous word was being documented. The second ally came through Marcus, investigator James Chun, who specialized in medical fraud and had been discreetly monitoring Harrison Construction's activities for months. He met Regina in a deserted parking lot. "We need someone on the inside," Chun said, handing it to him. "This device automatically copies any computer file it is connected to. If you can get access to David's office for just 5 minutes, we can have enough evidence to bring down the whole scheme. Regina smiled for the first time in weeks. 5 minutes? I clean that office every day. I have full access. What neither Chun nor Marcus knew was that Regina had already collected something even more devastating: video recordings. The Harrison mansion had internal security cameras that recorded continuously, but could only be accessed by David's main computer. Regina, during her cleaning duties, had discovered that he never changed his passwords and often left the system on. Over 2 weeks, she discreetly copied dozens of hours of recordings that showed Victoria making openly racist comments, David discussing fraudulent schemes on the phone, and even more devastating, a recorded conversation between David and other members of the hospital board where they laughed about disposable patients, a coded reference to poor black children. But the most explosive evidence came by accident. While organizing papers in David's office, Regina found a folder marked Special Projects. Inside were contracts showing that Harrison Construction had knowingly supplied defective medical equipment to public hospitals, while reserving top-of-the-line equipment for private hospitals where people like Isabella were treated. Most shocking, there was an internal memo dated 3 years earlier, just 2 months after Kevin's death, where David instructed her team to expedite the delivery of disposable units, cheap equipment with known defects, to hospitals serving non-priority populations. Regina held the paper with trembling hands. David Harrison not only knew he was killing children like Kevin, he had institutionalized and profited from it. That night when she got home, Regina opened his laptop and began meticulously organizing all the evidence she had collected: audio recordings, security videos, photograph documents, fraudulent contracts, and Marcus's testimony about the pattern of medical negligence. She created a devastating 47-slide presentation titled The Harrisons' Medical Genocide: How a Millionaire Family Turns Poor Children into Profit. Each slide contained irrefutable evidence: names, dates, amounts, and deadly consequences. Regina's plan was not just to expose the Harrisons, it was to completely destroy the empire built on the blood of children like Kevin. She would simultaneously send all the material to the FBI, the national media, civil rights organizations, and every member of the state health board. But there was one final twist that even Marcus and Chun didn't know about. Regina had discovered something that would turn her personal vendetta into a national revolution. In the Special Projects folder, she found evidence that the Harrison scheme wasn't limited to her city. It was a nationwide network of medical corruption involving 12 states and causing thousands of preventable deaths each year. While Victoria continued to treat her like an invisible maid and David maintained his facade as a respectable businessman, Regina Santos was just 72 hours away from destroying not only her lives but exposing one of the biggest public health scandals in American history. As she folded uniforms in the utility room that night, Regina looked out the window at the lit pool where Isabella played happily, protected by the same system that had killed Kevin. For a moment, she almost felt sorry for the innocent child growing up unaware that her fortune was built on little coffins. But then she remembered Kevin's smile, the dreams he would never fulfill, and all the other children whose lives were cut short so that the Harrisons could live like kings. There would be no more pity. Only justice. What the Harrisons couldn't see was that every day of arrogance, every racist comment, every moment they treated Regina as less than human, only fueled a determination that would soon become the greatest downfall in the history of the American medical elite. Tuesday morning began normally at the Harrison mansion. Victoria drank his $15 organic coffee while leafing through Forbes magazine, where David appeared on the cover as Entrepreneur of the Year in Hospital Innovation. Regina silently cleaned the table next to him, invisible as always. "David dear," said Victoria, pointing to the magazine, "we need to schedule that charity dinner at the Children's Hospital. It's important to maintain our philanthropic image." David smiled, adjusting his Italian tie. Of course. Especially after that $2 million contract he signed with them last week. Regina continued cleaning, but her eyes flashed with dangerous intensity. They had no idea that in exactly 6 hours, her life would be destroyed live on national television. At 9 in the morning, Regina received a message from Marcus: everything confirmed. The FBI, the press, and the district attorney's office are ready. At 3 o'clock sharp, you press the button. The button was literal. Regina had created a website called The Truth About the Harrisons that was scheduled to go live simultaneously on 12 different platforms. 47 slides of irrefutable evidence, 123 scanned documents, 16 audio recordings, and 24 security videos showing David and Victoria at his most cruel and racist. At 2:45 p.m., David was in a board meeting at the Municipal Children's Hospital, the very one where Kevin had died. In the room, 12 board members were discussing the approval of more economical equipment from Harrison Construction. "Gentlemen," David said confidently, "our company has always prioritized efficiency and economy to maximize care for a greater number of patients." At exactly 3 o'clock, every board member's cell phone began to ring simultaneously. Messages, notifications, urgent calls. Dr. Martinez, the board chairman, looked at his phone and his face turned completely pale. "David," Dr. Martinez said with a trembling voice, "you need to see this now." On the phone screen, the CNN headline was already trending, "Exclusive, leaked documents reveal $1 million medical corruption scheme that caused hundreds of infant deaths." Just below, a photo of David Harrison next to contracts showing defective equipment being sold at premium prices. David felt his blood run cold. He grabbed his own phone and saw 17 missed calls from Beatrice Morrison, his communications director. When he called her back, she was in a state of total panic. "David, it's a disaster. Someone leaked everything. Contracts, internal emails, recordings of you discussing disposable populations, documents showing that you knew the equipment was defective. The company's stock has already dropped 40% in 15 minutes. Meanwhile, at the mansion, Victoria watched herself on television in horror. A security recording from his own home showed her saying, "These people really have no sense of place. David is being too soft on her. In my day, this kind of person wouldn't have even come close to our daughter." The CNN anchor explained, the recordings were provided by an anonymous source who had access to the residence's internal security cameras. Victoria Harrison, the CEO's wife, appears making multiple racist comments about the employee who saved her daughter. Regina was in the backyard, pretending to water the plants, but watching everything through the window. Victoria was yelling at someone on the phone, "How is this possible? Who had access to our cameras? Sue him. Sue everyone." The third bombshell exploded when the FBI arrived at Harrison Construction headquarters with search and seizure warrants. David, who had rushed out of the hospital meeting, arrived to find federal agents carrying boxes of documents and computers. Agent Sarah Collins, leader of the operation, showed him the warrant. "David Harrison, you are under investigation for federal medical fraud, corruption, cartel formation, and manslaughter. We have evidence that her company knowingly supplied defective equipment that resulted in the deaths of at least 230 children in the last 5 years. This is absurd." David shouted, but her voice faltered when the agent showed her own memo, the one Regina had photographed, where he instructed to expedite the delivery of disposal units to non-priority populations. The fourth bombshell was the most devastating. Dr. Marcus Williams called a press conference at the Municipal Children's Hospital. Beside him stood the parents of 115 children who had died due to equipment failures from Harrison Construction. Kevin Santos was 7 years old when he died because the pediatric ventilator supplied by Harrison Construction had a faulty alarm system, said Marcus, holding Kevin's photo. Her mother, Regina Santos, works as a cleaner in the home of the family that profited from her son's death. Today, thanks to her courage, the truth has finally come to light. The camera focused on Regina, who was in the front row. She didn't cry, she didn't scream. She just looked directly into the lens and said with absolute calm, "My son Kevin died at the age of 7 because defective equipment was sold as if it were top quality. For 3 years, I cleaned the house of the people who profited from her death. Today, justice is not revenge. It is the truth being told." At the mansion, Victoria was having a complete nervous breakdown. Her high society friends began canceling appointments. The golf club temporarily suspended his membership, and Isabella came home from school crying because classmates had seen videos of her mother making racist comments on the internet. David came home devastated. His company had lost 70% of its stock value, $6 million contracts had been cancelled, and the board of directors had voted for his immediate removal as president. How did she do this? Victoria screamed, her eyes red from crying. How did a cleaning lady destroy our entire life? It was then that Regina appeared at the living room door, still in her uniform, but now with the posture of someone who had completely regained her dignity. "Because you underestimated me," she said, her voice firm and clear. "You believed I was just an ignorant cleaning lady. You never asked about her nursing training, about his years working in pediatrics, about his ability to understand exactly what you were doing to children like his son. David stared at her, finally understanding the magnitude of his own arrogance. You planned all this from day one. No, Regina replied calmly. I planned this from the day Kevin died because of equipment you knew was defective. I saved Isabella because I'm a nurse, because it's his oath to save lives. But exposing you? I did that because I'm the mother of a child killed by his greed. Victoria tried one last gambit. We can pay. Any amount you want. Regina smiled for the first time in years. You don't understand. This was never about money. It was about making sure no child dies the way Kevin did. The FBI already has enough evidence to prosecute not just him, but the entire national network of medical corruption. 143 hospitals, 12 states, thousands of lives saved. At that moment, the doorbell rang. It was reporters, curious neighbors, and ironically, lawyers offering their services to a couple who had just discovered they had more enemies than friends. Regina grabbed her purse, took one last look at the mansion where she had worked humbly while collecting evidence that would destroy an empire built on small coffins. Isabella will be fine, she told David before leaving. She's old enough to learn that privilege is not the right to kill poor people. And maybe when she grows up, she'll become the kind of doctor my son Kevin would have become. As Regina walked out of the mansion, his cell phone rang. It was Marcus. Regina, the Department of Health wants to hire you as a special consultant to overhaul the protocols for approving medical equipment. Salary of $150,000 a year, plus benefits. Regina looked back one last time. David was sitting on the marble steps of her $16 million mansion, his head in his hands, while Victoria yelled at lawyers on the phone. The Harrison empire had collapsed in less than 6 hours. Justice did not arrive with a loud bang. It arrived like a precise surgery, removing the cancer that killed innocent children while enriching soulless people. And Regina Santos, the underestimated cleaning lady, had been the scalpel that cut to the exact measure of truth. But there was one last revelation that even Marcus didn't know about, something Regina had discovered in the final documents that would make the Harrisons' downfall even more complete than anyone could have imagined. 6 months later, Regina Santos walked the halls of the Department of Health as Special Advisor for Hospital Equipment Reform, earning $150,000 a year, 5 times more than she had earned cleaning the Harrisons' mansion. Her first official decision was to implement the Kevin Santos protocol in hospitals in 12 states. Medical equipment now underwent rigorous checks before installation, and public hospitals received the same quality of equipment as private institutions. David Harrison, meanwhile, was sitting in a rented one-bedroom apartment, her bank accounts frozen by the FBI and facing 423 federal charges. Harrison Construction had gone completely bankrupt, and he discovered in the worst possible way that rich friends disappear when the money runs out. Victoria went even further down the social ladder. Videos of his racist comments went viral. She was kicked out of all the city's exclusive clubs, and Isabella had to change schools 3 times because of the bullying she suffered due to her mother's actions. But the final revelation Regina had kept was the most devastating of all. In the documents in the Special Projects folder, her discovery was that the Harrison scheme was part of a nationwide conspiracy involving 27 CEOs of medical companies, 42 politicians, and 89 hospital administrators. The FBI used Regina's evidence to launch Operation Scar, the largest medical corruption investigation in American history. In all, 163 people were arrested, 3 senators resigned, and the medical equipment approval system was completely overhauled. Dr. Marcus Williams, now director of the new Kevin Santos Children's Hospital, built with funds recovered from the companies involved in the scheme, sent a message to Regina: 547 children have been saved in the last 6 months thanks to the new protocols. Kevin would have been proud. Regina smiled as she read the message, sitting in his office overlooking the city. On the wall were 2 photos, one of Kevin holding a toy stethoscope, another of Isabella sending a drawing with the words, "Thank you for saving my life." The girl had discovered the truth about everything and wanted to thank him personally. David tried one last desperate move. He called Regina from a phone booth, his voice breaking. "I can testify against the other conspirators. Reduce my sentence. But I need you to confirm that I have shown remorse." Regina listened silently and replied with her characteristic calm, "David, I'm not going to help you reduce your sentence. But I'll give you something better, the chance to finally understand that some things in life cannot be bought, negotiated, or escaped. Responsibility is one of them. The call ended. David got her sentence: 25 years in federal prison. Isabella, now 8 years old, visited Regina in the hospital every Friday, helping to distribute toys to hospitalized children. The girl had become a passionate advocate for racial equality, teaching other children about social justice, an irony that even Regina could not have planned. Victoria, completely socially isolated and without financial resources, went to work as a clerk in a department store. For the first time in his life, he experienced what it meant to be treated as lower class, a lesson in humility that came too late to repair the damage he had caused. Regina founded the Kevin Santos Institute for Medical Justice, an organization that investigated hospital negligence and ensured equal treatment for all children, regardless of their family's financial status. In his first public speech as director, Regina looked out at an audience of 500 people: doctors, politicians, journalists, and families who had lost loved ones to medical negligence. "My son Kevin died because people like David Harrison believed that some lives are worth more than others. Today we prove that true wealth is not in bank accounts, but in the courage to speak up when we witness injustice." The audience rose in a standing ovation that lasted 3 minutes. Regina's best revenge was not to destroy the Harrisons. It was to build a legacy that would save thousands of children like Kevin. She turned her pain into purpose, her humiliation into dignity, and her loss into victory for families she didn't even know. David Harrison tried to break a black woman from the suburbs, thinking she was just an ignorant cleaning lady. Regina Santos showed that underestimating someone based on prejudice is the first step toward self-destruction. Today, the name Kevin Santos is engraved at the entrance of 17 renovated public hospitals. The name David Harrison is only found in court cases and criminal records. True justice is not just punishing those who do wrong, it is ensuring that the mistake is never repeated. And Regina proved that sometimes an underestimated cleaning lady can clean up much more than just dirt. She can clean up an entire system of corruption. If this story of overcoming adversity and justice touched his heart, subscribe to the channel to discover more stories that prove that true strength comes from those who fight for others, not just for themselves.